Well, good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. We still have people that are coming in, so we'll just give it another minute or two until everybody has an opportunity to join us. All right, well, welcome to the REIA update, August the 20th. I'm glad that you guys could join us today. And we're going to just jump right in it. We have some legislative things to update you guys on. And then, of course, we have some special guests from one of our favorites, NoteSchool, Eddie Speed and Brian Lauchner. So I'm going to turn it over to our executive director, Rebecca Mclean.
Thanks, Ryan. And yes, thank you so much for being with us today. Just a quick disclaimer, even though we may be talking about some financial principles today, we are not certified financial planners. We're not CPAs. We're not attorneys. So if you have those kinds of questions, please seek that information at a local level so they can help you with your specific needs. At National REIA, we have been around as a nonprofit real estate investor association for over 35 years with a mission to promote, protect, and educate. And we have local groups in almost every major city, and we want to say, and many that aren't major cities, actually, plenty of secondary markets as well. We want to say thank you so much for being here today, and we want to thank our sponsors too, the Home Depot Pro. They have been so good to us, and they have some special programs with us that we know that you will enjoy if you don't already, which include cabinet programs, paint programs that are 20% off at the register, and many others, as well as a rebate program. If you're interested in those programs, you can always check those out on our website and join at the local REIA level to be able to engage in those programs. Now, if you're looking for a local REIA, you can do that on the National REIA site. Just to let you know, for now, the top bar is all COVID-19 information. So you can click right there in the yellow and you will be kept up to date with all the things that are happening concerning COVID and the fallout from that. But to find a local group, you can click right here on I'm an Investor, and the Find a Local group will take you to a map where you can find local real estate associations all across the country where you can join. As Ryan said, we are here today with NoteSchool. This is a part one of a two-part session. They'll be back with us in October. Today, they're going to talk a little bit to those who are property owners that are looking at rentals. Either you own them or you want to own them. And a little bit more than that, but that's going to be a bulk of it. And then we'll be back in October to talk about some other creative financing ideas with notes. But before they get started, I want to say really quickly that we're inviting you to finish out the rest of the year with us to talk about alternative investing strategies. We know many of you may be struggling in your particular local market with the strategy that's been your go-to for years. And so we're going to talk about different strategies that may or may not work for you in your area, but we'll give you an overview of things maybe you either had heard about previously but decided not to pursue, or maybe you've never heard about it all. So make sure that you stay tuned with us over the next several months as we head into the end of the year, same time, same place, right here on the third Friday at 4 o'clock on this channel. So now, though, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Charles because we got some not terrific news. Charles, I hate for you to be the bad guy of the hour, to be the messenger relaying bad news, but you told us it was coming. Talk to us about the ruling that came out today. What does that mean for us? And then how does it look going forward?
So the ruling that came out today, Rebecca, again, we expected this. This is the circuit court for DC. This issue, thank you, Lori, for posting that. Literally 3:03 today just broke. Those of you who remember, we were on calls during COVID when this first started back in March and April, and literally in the middle of the meeting, I'd go, hold on a second, new update, here's what's going on. Well, we almost did that today. They beat it by 57 minutes. So an hour and, about an hour ago, they came out and said the DC court just basically reaffirmed what they had said last time, nothing unexpected. They said, well, yes, the government has authority to do this eviction moratorium. Therefore, we're going to approve it and continue on. We're not going to stop this moratorium, which is what they did last time. So nothing unusual. This is expected. Now comes the real question. And I will say this actually came a little faster. We weren't expecting it for another 7 to 10 days. So what this does is now puts the Supreme Court in a position to weigh in. They have to decide now whether they're going to come back and weigh in. And Judge Kavanaugh is one of those folks who, he said, yeah, we'll leave the moratorium in place because it's going to end. But by the way, it needs to have congressional approval to go forward. That's what we're waiting. Now, since he's been called out by everybody from the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, across the board, that the only reason this is still around is because he sided with the majority at that point to allow the eviction moratorium to stay in place. So now the question will be, does the Supreme Court pick this up or not? That's the key question. If the Supreme Court picks this up, what will they do with it? If they defer and say, we're going to come back, we're not going to weigh in on emergency, they won't come back until right around October 3rd when this expires. That could happen. They could just defer. The problem is you've got now the DC Circuit has said it should stay in place, and you've got the Sixth Circuit saying we're striking it down. Typically, they don't like split circuit decisions. So that does force them to a degree to at least take this into consideration. So that's really what we're waiting for. We knew this decision was coming. We knew it was going to be what it was because it's not like the majority on the court had changed in the DC Circuit. So this is not unusual. Sit back, hold on. There'll be some more paperwork on this. Headlines, yeah, it's staying in place. This is what we expected. So just breathe. Let's get through this. Focus on rental assistance. Keep reaching out on that. I actually heard from 2 different social agencies that have national impact today, and they are really trying to push to get more participation on one side from property owners. And in fact, I got a call from one group who said, wait a second, you mean the people who are giving out the money haven't contacted you guys and your organization yet? I said, no. In fact, one of these other organizations have, and these folks have. They said, you've got to be kidding. Well, let me take care of that. They'll be talking to you Monday morning. I said, okay, thank you. So there's efforts like that. And what's going on is behind the scenes, there's a best practices that are being shared around. And some places aren't going to care. They aren't going to change their ways. Sorry for you folks in Illinois and other places, it. There are going to be tight areas where it's slow and tight to get the money out. But of that first tranche of money, there's a real push to get it out. And that is, they sense that they're under a deadline. And if the Supreme Court starts to pick this up, you're going to see that deadline shrinking for them. So they know they've got to get the money out. So that's where we're at on that. Nothing unexpected at this point, but just heads up, this is what's going on. So let me mention one other thing for you. And this is something that's been coming out and increasing in number. We are on a partnership with Homeland Security and FBI for InfraGard. And this is one of the things that they asked us to reach out on is more phishing scams. And these are a little more sophisticated phishing scams. And no, Tim, I'm not talking about largemouth bass. This is about people who will call up, or actually, let me phrase it. There are people who will call you, and then it's Social Security. Social Security never called you. But what they will do is they will actually send you an email, and it looks like it's from your bank. They'll have a convenient number on there, and they'll say, by the way, we think there's a scam going on with your account, and reach out to us at this number. We'll help with your customer service and take care of this issue for you. Well, that number isn't really to your bank, it's actually to them. And so the person on the other side has got this great customer service process. They know which bank they're supposedly picking up for, and they talk you through it. And eventually they get the information out of you that they need to take over your accounts or to drain your accounts. And the really sad part about this is they're doing it to people under the premise of trying to help. So make sure your members are aware that if they're getting emails, make sure they're calling the bank from their numbers, not the email number. Okay, that's what's going on with this latest phishing scam. So we're seeing that it's taking people literally for thousands and tens of thousands of dollars. Once they get into your account, if you've let them in, you may not be able to get any kind of recoup on it. And in doing research on this, the FBI, unless it's over $90,000 stolen, and typically multiple accounts of 90,000 stolen, they don't even have time to look at it because there's that many of them going on. So if you've got the wherewithal to lose that kind of money and not miss it, by all means, pay those, go out and follow those little fishing lures. But otherwise, please let people know, share this with friends and family. I'd rather not lose $9 to these scammers, let alone 90,000. So that's what's out there. Those are a couple of things that are going on. Be careful, be aware, and just, again, eviction moratorium, rental assistance, stay calm and steady, and let's see what the Supreme Court does, because it's now in their court. All right.
Good. Rebecca, any other announcements before we get to our special guests?
That's all I have. You can proceed.
Okay. And I just kind of wanted to share this too. I mean, this is a great place for us to share information together. And I'm not saying for anybody to hinge their investing based upon this, but my group and myself in South Florida, we do a lot of short sales. We're negotiating probably 40 or 50 short sales right now at any one time with different banks and servicers. And we've been getting sale dates set on almost every single file. And we got an email that I'm actually looking at right now today from one of our conditional approvals from Reverse Mortgage Solutions. And they actually made a note. The actual bank had sent us an email that said all foreclosure holds are lifted as of 7/30, June 30 or July 30th for that, for that particular servicer. So there are still, foreclosures and things that are happening. We've actually been strategizing to get some of the sale dates canceled to remind them, hey, there's the CDC moratoriums. But as far as in our market here in Florida, and I've seen some in Ohio as well, because I do short sales there, we're still seeing some folks getting foreclosed on. And as I'm sure Charles has communicated as well, it doesn't necessarily apply to every single person in the country. So it's just, just to know that there are still some foreclosure sales that are happening now.
Yeah, Mr. President, those FHA bans, they do apply to a large sector, but it is not everyone, as you well said. And I've heard numbers ranging from 40% to 53%. So
Yeah.
who knows how many it actually is based on dollar amounts and all, but
Yeah.
that's FHA behind the scenes.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that information, just, as we're all getting through this together. So information and communicating about all these things is what this is all about. So today also, as Rebecca had said, we have a couple special guests. If you guys are not familiar, NoteSchool, the #1 in the world for education on buying and selling performing and non-performing notes. We've had them many times come to speak to our groups over the years, and a lot of our members have become investors with NoteSchool. So if anybody's going to be talking about some alternative methods, Eddie Speed has been in this business for a very long time, and also Brian Lauchner from NoteSchool. These guys really know what they're talking about. So we're excited to have them here today, because this is all about us thinking outside the box and trying to come up with some alternative ways to invest in real estate. So do we have Eddie and Brian on?
All right. Well, thank you so much.
we go.
We're very excited to kind of dig into this. My name is Brian Lauchner. I am with NoteSchool, and I've got my good friend Eddie Speed here. And for those of you who don't know Eddie Speed, let me just sum it up real quick for you in about one sentence. I like to refer to him as the man who's been around for 40 years, and he's done over 50,000 deals. And so he is, the man, the myth, the legend, right? He's joined us today to be able to provide some insight and all this stuff. So how are you doing, Eddie?
I'm good, Brian. Thank you. It's a team, it's an effort, right? So you get to help a lot of NoteSchool students get started and down the road, and I get to sit back and kind of get to use some experience to see the next opportunity on the horizon.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually one of the reasons I asked you to join today. Is I wanted to get your vision on just a couple of things as I present this here to National REIA, so that they can hear it straight from the horse's mouth, right? That's something you would say in Mississippi, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so we'll kind of dig into it and really just to kind of give everybody a little bit of a background. I've kind of designed this to say, hey, let's take this and show you the whole picture. Then let's really start to dig into where is the pain in the marketplace, and really where is the opportunity in the marketplace. And so for those of you who are not familiar with Note School, we teach all kinds of different strategies really in the creative financing and note business. And so let me walk through a couple things, because creative financing, right? Buying houses on terms. Now you might have heard this phrase. It's a very broad phrase, but I'm telling you, if you'll kind of lean in a little bit and just kind of embrace a different way of thinking, you're going to learn a whole bunch today. Because really, when we're talking about creative financing, obviously we're talking about buying a house where the seller's going to provide the financing, right? Not a bank, not a different private lender or something. And this is actually the solution to a lot of your inventory problems if you're having trouble buying houses today. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But really, there's an interesting opportunity in today's marketplace, because once you buy a property and you have the house and you have the financing, what can you do with it? Right? You can rent it, you can wholesale it, you can fix and flip it, you can do whatever you want with it. It's your house, right? But one of the interesting things that Eddie is very, very skilled at is this concept of turning around and selling it to another buyer. So you're going to buy it with the seller providing the financing. Then you're going to turn around and you're going to provide the financing to somebody else. And this is the process of creating your own note. So when you hear about the note business, a note is just simply a promise to pay. Somebody owes somebody something. And in this case, a buyer has a mortgage, a note, a payment to you, and you would have a payment owed to someone else. And this is a very fascinating concept that we're going to dig in today. But before we do this, I want to go ahead and at least give you the other side of the coin. I want to give you the whole picture so you at least have a better understanding of really how broad this marketplace really can be. Because once you've created a note is created, you're in the note business. And once you're in the note business, there's a whole other world out there that most of you don't even know about. You could actually start by wholesaling or flipping a note just to create some income. Instead of wholesaling the house, you could wholesale the paper side of real estate, right? This is how you started at 20 years old, right, Eddie?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is just a way to generate some cash today, right? Generate a fee. And then for all those you out there who you say, Brian, look, I just want to be passive, or stop asking me to work, or I really want to build my wealth. That's what this conversation of performing loans is all about. This is a note that was created in the past. Maybe they put a down payment down and they've proven that they're paying. And now that your risk has been lowered on this asset, you could step in and say, now I want to get involved and I don't want to have to give up my return. And there's some unbelievable strategies that are within this performing note strategy that it's by far the best wealth building tool that I've ever seen. We don't have time to talk about it today, but I really wanted to just at least point it out. And then really from here, right, outside of just buying and holding notes, instead of buying and holding maybe a rental property, something like that, where else can the conversation go? And one of the interesting conversations when Eddie asked me to join the teaching team here at Note School was really this burnout landlord conversation. And what does that mean? Well, you got to understand, between 2010 and 2020, right? Basically the last 10, 11 years, there was an additional 18 million new landlords entering the space. 18 million new people, like on top of what there was, right? And what does this mean? This means there's a lot of newer people, lack of experience, and lack of experience a lot of times leads to a lack of understanding of what's really possible and sometimes what the smartest thing to do in the marketplace is. And we're going to really address that. And really, these landlords, what I've always recalled Eddie's from Mississippi, so he says burnout, right? They're a burnout landlord. I've always called them an accidental landlord. They didn't want to become a landlord. They were flipping a house and it didn't work out the way they wanted it to. And so they thought, all right, we'll put a tenant in here. What could possibly go wrong, right? That's one of those phrases that's a kiss of death. And so this is a fascinating concept for, interestingly enough, this is actually the best source to acquire deals from, but this is also the number one source for where you should be raising capital in today's marketplace. And so we can dig into that a little bit, but I'll sum it up and kind of finish the whole, the pie here and really kind of point out this buying defaulted loans piece. And what that means is you're buying a mortgage that isn't paying. And why in the world would you be interested in buying a mortgage if they're not paying? Where's my cash flow, right? Isn't that what we do this for? And here's the thing. This is more like, instead of fixing and flipping a house, this is like fixing and flipping the paper side of real estate. This is fixing and flipping a note. And the real reason this is a massive importance in today's marketplace is you might have heard about this pandemic that happened in 2020. Well, people stopped paying their mortgages. And so there's a ton of these in the marketplace today. In fact, we were starting with 5.5 million of these that were before the pandemic. And so there's just this big buildup. There's a massive opportunity here. And so really NoteSchool, this is what NoteSchool really does, right? It identifies where is the need in the marketplace, where's the void, and then let's bring light to that and educate you on how you can take advantage of today's marketplace so that you're not really struggling to survive in tough economic times, right? And so this is what we call the 6 biggest niches in the note business. It's kind of the bigger picture, but specifically for today, there's 2 things that I thought would be important to talk about in the time that we have available, right? And so the first thing I really want to talk about is really where we are today, right? In the market today, what's your strategy, right? And I would say less important than what's your strategy is what's your secret sauce? How are you beating the competition? How are you competing with the iBuyers of the world, right? These big internet companies like Zillow and stuff that are out there making ridiculous offers. How are we supposed to survive? And a better question, and one of the things I love about NoteSchool is the way they think is, it's not how am I going to survive, it's how am I going to thrive? And so what I want to do is I want to start the conversation and really talk about the marketplace today, right? And really where we've been in the last, let's call it 18 months, right? A little longer, year or 2. And I want to bring in Eddie. Eddie, share a little bit about just what is your vision for where we are today, and what are you seeing specifically as far as what we should be looking at?
Yeah, that's what we talked about, is the market beyond the mass. So let's kind of look at, the scope of what's good, Brian, and what's bad. Now, think in terms of an iceberg, right? Okay. So if we have an iceberg here, what's great? Oh, well, what's great is the stock market's booming, right? Sure. We've got a raging residential real estate market, right? And we've got super low rates. Boy, those are some crazy good things that are all happening in tandem. Oh, but wait a minute. Is there any void in the market? Is there any opportunity to understand that there is something that's not going right in the market? And why does that matter to me? I mean, because if you think about it, Brian, there's not a shortage of properties. I can call enough realtors and find enough houses that I can find houses. I could go buy 1,000 houses in a month if I just call enough realtors, right? Oh, what you're trying to say is you want to make a value buy. Well, that's a horse of a different color, right? So understand what's not good is what becomes, Brian, I call it the crease in the market. If the market is this, is there a dent somewhere? Is there a crease? And that crease is, did you know, Brian, that of FHA loans in existence, 14% of those are not paying?
A lot.
This non-performing thing, there may be something to that. Overall, 9% of residential mortgages aren't paying. 10 million renters are behind $54 billion in rent. 35% decline in the mortgage availability. So let me just let's do simple math. Let's start before the virus, February of last year, right? February 2020. 1,000 people could qualify for a mortgage. Let's go forward. Let's look at the fall of 2021. 650 people of what was 1,000, only now 650 can get a mortgage. Mortgage credit availability. That's a huge factor. We'll talk about why that's a huge advantage for us if we know how to take advantage of the strategy. And the next thing is commercial real estate's in deep trouble. So those are all things that are leading to, Brian, what you're going to lay out as the opportunity.
Yeah. And I think something that's important is, getting to hang around somebody like Eddie, you hear certain phrases. And one of the things I love that he points out is, well, what's the elephant in the room, right? We got to talk about really what's going on in specific marketplaces. And today, obviously, there was a pandemic. And if you boil down what the situation is in the market is today, it boils down to this simplicity of it. It's really hard to buy at a value, like you said, Eddie, but it's really easy to sell. right? Really, really easy to sell. And this is actually a piece that sounds really interesting, but there's a pain that comes with it. And that pain we're going to talk about is that big tax burden. But before we get to that, I really want to kind of talk about this, because the landlords of today, right? There's hobbyist landlords, there's professional landlords. If you own, I would say, less than 10 doors, 10 rental properties, you're going to be categorized typically as a hobbyist landlord, right? Don't take it personally. It's not a bad thing. It just means you're not BlackRock, you're not Warren Buffett, you're not a hedge fund, right? And this slide that I'm showing you right here, this just shows you really what the variables in the market are. Because once I understand the variables, now I could take those variables and build a real strategy. And when 72% of the rental properties today, 16.9 million people are owned in 16.9 million properties are owned in an individual name, this is the definition of a hobbyist landlord. This is telling you that, okay, so when I look at the marketplace, if I wanted to buy houses, there's a bunch of people who own them in their individual name. These are hobbyists. These aren't hedge funds I got to work with or something like that. Then of course, you've got 16% here that are going to be your limited partnerships. We've got some REITs, some corporations, and then there's obviously always going to be something that's considered other. But the reason I bring this up is it always boils down to opportunity, right? A hobbyist landlord, right? The average landlord is not going to think of this strategy. They're not going to call a buyer and say, hey, look, I want to sell my property and I want to do it on what's called an installment sale, right? Meaning I'm going to be the bank. I'm going to take payments over time. They wouldn't even know to ask this question, right? And if you're somebody sitting at home thinking, why would they want to do this? We're going to really talk about it. But when we really dig into the opportunity, most people don't do this strategy of an installment sale for the benefit that we're going to talk about. And the reason they don't is they don't know it. They don't understand it. And so it's really important that we kind of get this across today, because once you know how this can work, as well as how this can really benefit you, I mean, you can really take advantage of today's, opportunity. And really, to sum it up in probably the most simplistic sentence, if you're somebody who wants to sell a property at the highest price you can, and you really want to pay as low taxes as you possibly can, then this conversation is really for you, right? And really, no matter which side of the coin you're on, this is something you need to entertain. You'll see that even if you're wanting to buy more houses right now, this is a conversation you really need to dig into. And so we're going to talk about this hobbyist landlord, or we're going to really identify this avatar, if you will, because you might be this person, you might know this person, and this might be information that you need to go share this information with somebody else. And they need to contact, NoteSchool or National REIA to kind of figure out what can be next for them, right? Because when we're looking at the world of the hobbyist landlord, the majority of them, they self-manage. Now, I know you've been to classes and webinars and maybe seminars in the past where they say, the smart investor, they always get a property management company. Well, I'm here to tell you that the data says otherwise, right? The smart person might, but 14.3 million, right? Over almost 75%, if not more, self-manage. They're running over there to change the air filter. They're leasing these things out themselves, right? They're putting in the work. And the thing you always got to remember about somebody who self-manages property, if you've run a lot of appointments, if you've been talking to sellers, when you sit down that there's always these pains you're trying to identify. Well, with a hobbyist landlord, you know the pain before you ever talk to this person. They're tired of dealing with the tenants and the toilets and the turnover. They've been doing it, all of them, they've been doing it themselves. And so now all of a sudden, this market condition has happened to where the prices are going crazy, right? I mean, the prices have been doing this for essentially a decade. And so now it's it's high enough to where they're intrigued to say, well, maybe I can get out of this headache. Maybe I can sell this, right? And that's the beginning of the conversation. The other thing you got to understand about the hobbyist landlord is it's not always the pain of they can't afford their mortgage or something like this. 10.3 million of these properties, 60% of these rental properties are free and clear. Now, this is a little confusing to some investors because it's not to ever negate the conversation about these with financing. We know with that many millions of people not paying rent, right? When tenants don't pay rent, what happens to the landlord? The landlord is then put in a situation to, how am I supposed to support this operating income to pay my mortgage, to pay the taxes? We understand there's a big pain there as well. And because of that, what I'm trying to show you is that no matter what type of hobbyist landlord they are, right? If they've self-managed or they use a property management company, if it's free and clear, or if they've got debt on it, we're in a market condition where there's pain just surrounding really everybody. And so I tell you this story because this data really helps to build the infrastructure for where we're going in the conversation. Now that there's a pain, we're hardwired to want to avoid pain, right? That's not, that's a very well-known thing.
Let me give a stat here, because I think this is important, because I think somebody may be asking, well, where did you find this out? How do you know this? Like, Eddie, I appreciate your experience, but do you actually know this? These are landlords that own 1 to 5 units in their individual name. And all this data was sourced from Urban Institute. So this was a great research project that our guys put together. And so this is really important. This is like market data that most small investors don't realize. So let's get back to the pain. Let's get back to solving their problem.
That's it. Because we all know that as a real estate investor, our job is to bring some sort of creative solution to whatever their complicated problem is. If we don't bring the right solution, we're never getting a deal done. I'm sure you've sat with sellers and you don't know how to solve their problem. Well, if you don't know how to solve the problem, you're not getting a deal. So here's kind of where I want to go with this conversation, because now this hobbyist landlord, they've finally been, it almost seems like their own little bailout. The market's been going like this for how long? A decade or more, right? And they're faced with this weird decision. I could sell my house today and I could make a lot of money. But if I make a lot of money, what does that come with, Eddie? Uncle Sam's taxes. That's it. That's it. And I've heard Eddie say this, that it turns out Uncle Sam, he likes his taxes, right? And so here's the thing, when we're looking at this, it doesn't matter if you got a free and clear house. It doesn't matter if you've got debt on the property, right? As the hobbyist landlord with this pain, again, you feel like you've got an option, but now all of a sudden, this is a strategy that's going to apply to absolutely any landlord. Why? Because as Eddie says, I hear the government, they like to tax everybody these days, right? You don't get special privileges for buying extra houses. And so the point here is this, that there's a ton of landlords with this kind of story, right? And the more knowledge you have, meaning that you've been able to buy hundreds of houses instead of 1 to 5 or 10, just because you have more knowledge doesn't mean you don't end up in this same problem. Everybody's looking at the market saying, now's the time to sell, right? So really what I want to do from here is, when we have this big burden, this, you have such an upside, but it comes with this whole new pain you're creating for yourself. How can we start to get away from the pain and really just start to focus on the solution? So what I want to do is I really want to show you what I think is a great example of how you can solve your own problem. Maybe you can solve the problem for other sellers, other landlords, if you're trying to buy properties. And so let's kind of take a look at this. Let's say you bought a rental property in 2014. Okay. This would be still, in terms of most of the market, this is towards the bottom of the market. So you bought a property at $100,000 and you've had it rented out. And regardless of your situation, sometimes tenants pay, they don't pay, yada, yada, yada. Let's keep it really easy. The market's gone bananas and your house is now worth $250,000. So that kind of makes you raise an eyebrow when you say, well, that's a good chunk of change. This is an extra $150,000 I could put in my pocket. Or is it? Right? If you are going to make $150,000, well, now I got this big tax burden. So let's just assume, and I know everybody pays different tax rates and nothing we say is going to be considered accounting advice or financial advice, right? But for illustration purposes, if you owed 150 grand, let's just call the tax bill 30 grand. Okay. Just as an example. So you got to come up with $30,000 and be willing to let that leave your bank account this year. What I want to do is I want to say you could pay this $150,000 today, which really would be not that comfortable. Or you see that how that bar goes up and down. This means you're paying it all at this point in time. But if I could take this $150,000 and I could lay it on its side, right? Meaning that over time, I'm going to take the same amount of money, but I'm really just going to pay it over time. I could take the same amount of $150,000 and I could spread that out over 15 years. And this would allow me to take a little bit of money over time. And now I'm only responsible to pay the tax burden on that annual income. So for example, in year one, as you see on the far left, I got to pay taxes on $10,000. So if that was $2,000 in taxes, what's better for you this year? $2,000 in taxes or $30,000? I'm pretty sure we don't need a calculator for that one, right, Eddie?
No, and here's the thing about it. What we've discovered is the small landlord, this hobbyist landlord, he doesn't hang out in groups like we do. So he's not told these things. And the truth of the matter is he's probably using an accountant that's, he's known from the past or is somebody in his area. And he's not even using the same accounting specialist, Brian, that you and I are using. So this is missed information. IRS makes it very clear you can do an installment sale and take that capital gain over time. But here's the issue. Unless you brought it up to your customer, they wouldn't think of doing it.
Absolutely. And something else to really point out here, I think that's interesting is, there's always some sort of administrative approach to raise or lower taxes. And something that's really fascinating, specifically for 2021, and why this is really important that you pay attention is, there's a conversation that potentially the capital gains rate can double, right, Eddie?
Yeah, now that's not on all capital gains, but that would affect a lot of people, and people's awareness of capital gains is excessively higher than it was in the past. So this is, let's just call it, Brian, what it is. It's an emotional trigger that would let you make a deal that otherwise people might not be so motivated to make.
That's it. And you made a comment about how, well, it's really not on all capital gains. And specifically, the reason I think you say that is because this would allow us to lock in some capital gains rates today on an installment loan, right? That wouldn't make me subject to these higher rates in the future. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's really where I would say the rubber meets the road, right? When you realize that you can essentially lock in these lower tax rates, now you're kind of double dipping. We're locking in lower tax rates. We're also spreading out that tax burden. And that's a big win. So now you kind of understand this. Let me kind of backpedal a little bit, right? And go back a little bit farther in this story, because maybe you're somebody who, that story I just told you, that's if you own a rental property right now and you wanted to sell it, right? You've owned it for 6-7 years. What if you're somebody who, you're a wholesaler, you want to buy more rental properties or something like this? How does it look if I was going to go and solve the problem for the seller? Well, this is the other side of the coin, right? So here I am, I'll be the buyer in the black dress today. And we've got our seller over here who wants to sell the house. And traditional real estate, we all know that if they're going to sell the house, well, okay, I'm going to end up getting ownership, but I've got to go out and I've got to fund this transaction. And in the retail world, right, people are going and they're going to their banks and they're getting a mortgage. And there's nothing wrong with going and getting a mortgage. I'm not telling you to not do it. What I'm telling you is that this is just a way to do it. And if you can get mortgages, get as many until you essentially mortgage out, right? They stop giving you mortgages at a certain point. But as Eddie, he kind of dropped this hint in here. We're going to talk about it in a minute. But what if you can't get a mortgage? What if you could before the virus, but now the banks are saying, actually, we don't work with people like you anymore? Well, now all of a sudden the bank isn't an option, right? But if you can get a mortgage, get it. If you can't, we've got a solution for you, because the bank, in this case, the building, the institution, they're going to put a lien on the property. They're going to fund the transaction and you're good to go. Where I really want to make sure you understand in today's marketplace is, what if we got rid of the bank, right? What if the seller stepped in and played the role of the bank? And the argument here is, Mr. Seller, I'd like to talk to you about this other concept, because if you were to sell your house today, you can get this much money, and this much money means you pay this much taxes. But what I can do, because I have a creative solution to your complicated tax burden, I want to introduce another strategy that might help you really pay less taxes, and what's even cooler than that, I could probably even give you a price that no one else is willing to give you. And so this becomes a really, really fascinating conversation. Again, if we wanted to buy more houses, but now you're understanding the other side of, okay, now I understand why the seller would be interested. So they go to, they're willing to do the seller financing. And one of the things we don't have time to talk about today, but Eddie is an absolute ninja when it comes to the terms and getting terms that you wouldn't traditionally get. You definitely wouldn't get from a bank. But if you're somebody who wants to buy a house with, say, 0% interest, or I'm not going to make payments for 3 months or 6 months, you'll have to follow up with us. There's a whole other conversation there, right? But in this case, for this example, the seller says, yes, I'm willing to seller finance. I'm going to buy it at $200,000 and we're going to put $20,000 down. And there's a seller finance amount of $180,000, right? So $180,000 is owed to the seller. So now we've got this note, or I'm sorry, we've got a note generated, right? The buyer owes money to the seller. The question becomes, how do we exit it? Because again, if I buy a house and I've got the financing with it, I could do anything that I want. But if I go and do something in today's marketplace and try to resell this thing, I've got a huge tax burden. So what would be some interesting ways to increase my revenue, right? And maybe address a lot of this tax burden issue. And really what I want to do is, Eddie, I'm going to bring you back in here because you have this very unique vision on really kind of a whole underserved market in the real estate space. And you've referred to it before as seller financing 4.0. And so kind of just walk us through your view of what seller financing 4.0 is and why it's so unique in today's marketplace.
Well, if a lot of you have known people that seller financed, then you know what I'm talking about. And that is a lot of people that seller finance, not everybody, clearly, but they're seller financing properties that aren't that good, Brian. They're seller financing, let's call it substandard real estate.
Okay.
And when you're financing substandard real estate and you're trying to sell it to somebody, wonder who might show up at your doorstep. Substandard buyers that have substandard credit, that have substandard qualifications. So wait a minute. Didn't we say, Brian, that 35% of the people that could get a mortgage before the virus can't get one now? Didn't you say that even the average credit on an FHA loan today is like 750? So understand, seller financing 4.0 is selling a really good house to a really good buyer that the market is left behind. Let's look at some stats.
Okay. Let me do this. Let me ask you this new buyer, right, that you're referring to. You've been around in the game for 40 years and you've seen seasons of real estate where you have a junky house, and I think manufactured homes is what a lot of people think of, because you used to seller finance manufactured homes because they couldn't get a mortgage on it. So you'd seller finance it. They could never refinance out. You end up with the property. And that just became almost tied to seller financing. And so if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying we're getting way away from that. And we want a nice house, because in the event we had to take it back, we want a nicer product. Right. But you're also looking for a borrower who's willing to put some serious skin in the game, as well as always make the payments. Right. That's what we want. We want payments made. So what do you call this person?
Well, I call them a penalty box buyer. It's a hockey term, right? I call them a penalty box buyer, and that penalty box buyer really is good. He says golf is fun. So the truth of the matter is they're not bad. They just have, I believe they've been left behind.
Yeah.
So go through some stats and like show them why that's true. Because once again, when this is not something that most real estate investors, Brian, are walking around with a clear understanding of. And Brian, let's agree on this. You can just go be another tomato, as the old saying goes, and be like everybody else. or you can position yourself with a different knowledge and a different strategy. And all of a sudden you find a void that other people don't even know to look for.
That's it. That's it. And so let me kind of pull up something. You mentioned something the other, just a minute ago about the mortgage credit availability index. So I pulled up that slide here. And really what I want everybody to understand about this, if you're taking notes, is this, that what you see is kind of this big ramp up. And what this is showing you is this is who is qualified to get a mortgage at that time. Now you'll see the dates at the bottom from 2011 up to pretty much today, right? The last quarter. And then all of a sudden there's this massive spike down, right? And obviously we know that around March of 2020, that's what happened. The banks started to say, hang on a second, we don't want to just give a loan to everybody, right? Because as the bank, we want to make sure if things go bad, we're protected. So how do we start to mitigate our risk? Well, we start to come up with rules that help us and don't help you. And so really what this is showing you, and why I want to take a second to really talk about this, is there's more penalty box buyers today than ever before. See, this is actually a $1 trillion marketplace. There's 4 million people turned down for these reasons in 2019. This is before the virus. And if the average property value was like 250,000, that's a $1 trillion market. Now you're telling me 35% more people are not qualified for mortgages. Why are they not qualified? Did they lose their job? Did they ruin their credit? Are they addicted to gambling? Like, what is it? No, it's not them. This is what's so unique. This is the banks mitigating the risk. And a perfect example is actually Chase Bank. If you were following the news in March of 2020, it was like in a week and a half, like on a Monday, Chase Bank said, hey, if you have a 620 credit score, we can give you a mortgage. And then like later on in the week, it was like 650 or 670. And by that next week, you needed a 700 credit score to get a mortgage at Chase. So here's the question. You got a 699 credit score. You're ramping up to buy your first family home. You're all excited. Pandemic starts and Chase Bank says, sorry, you're at 699. You need to be at 700. You were weeded out, not because of something you did, but because the bank was trying to protect themselves. This is what it looks like to be a penalty box buyer. You didn't do anything wrong, right? Maybe you didn't lose your job. You didn't lose your income, right? Whatever those variables were. There are way more people affected by this than we really give credit to because you typically don't see it. People don't walk around with signs saying, my credit score dropped, I can't get a mortgage, right? And so what this means is anytime data it comes up, there's an opportunity in the market. You just have to look for it. And what Eddie's really referring to is when there's this many more people who really need a second chance, not because they stopped paying their bills, not because they ruined their credit, but because the banks decided you're no longer lendable. This person needs a second chance. And the best part is we can help a ton of people get into homes and we can make a lot of money doing it. And there's more buyers today than ever before. So when Eddie's talking about buying a really good product, well, appreciation, people have been fixing up their houses. Houses are starting to look pretty good. A good borrower, there's better borrowers now than ever. And I don't have the stats specifically with me, but what I can tell you is that there is a lot of what we have as investors are these limiting beliefs. Like we believe this one thing and it's not true. People have more money today than you probably realize. The average down payment was below 20%, I believe, before the pandemic, and now it's over 20%. Eddie, you remember that number?
Yeah, the average down payment is a shocking number today. I think the next slide, you've got it. I mean, this is, and so, once again, this is all source data. Ellie Mae is the software company that gathers more mortgage data than probably anybody out there. So Brian, here is the average conventional mortgage, average loan to value. Now, this is not for refis. This is only for new purchases, okay, is 81%. So it's pretty simple. Take 100%,
yeah,
subtract 81%. Brian, what's the average down payment?
Pretty big.
19%?
Yeah.
Almost 20% down. And that is for a conventional mortgage. So it shows us today, people ask us, is it realistic? I can seller finance this really nice property and get, call it 15 to 20% down. And the answer is 100%.
Yeah. And the other variable to consider here too is I kind of mentioned credit score, and Eddie referred to a conversation him and I have had before which is, FHA trades these pools of loans. And just because the FHA website says, we are okay with, credit scores of 580 or 620, follow the money, see what they actually do. And FHA, they might tell you, oh yeah, we're loaning to people with 620 credit scores, but the average score on the last pool of loans was a 740 credit score. So, I mean, they're only looking for people that would really lower their risk. That really shows you how much opportunity there is in the market. All kinds of people are really needing something like this. And so the reason we really talk about this is it really takes somebody actually like Eddie Speed to point this out, because you need to be around for 40 years to see it consistently happen. And creative financing is really this conversation of, it's a variable that really comes into full force to fill the gap when the conventional lending space doesn't, right? So like, think about in 2005 and 6 and 7, right? Even if you weren't in the real estate space, you've heard of these stories. No job, no income verification. If you can fog a mirror, you can get a loan. This is by definition what easy money is. You can get, a loan easy. But then something happens, a market shift, lending dries up, a pandemic happens. And what happens is the conventional lending space says, hold on a second, we want to protect ourselves. We're going to lower this amount of people, right, that we're going to lend to. Well, here's the problem. There's still the same number of buyers and sellers. They didn't go anywhere. People didn't stop living their lives because the banks wanted to change their rules. And so what happens is this creative financing, the seller financing world, it's really going to continue to fill the gap in the marketplace. And so when we're in this time of what is called scarce money, when the banks are pulling back, seller financing really fills this void. And what I love about this is you can help more people with this strategy than any other strategy I've found. Not just helping sellers, right? If you want to buy properties, you can help them really defer their taxes. You can help them get the price they want, right? But now you're helping a whole underserved part of the country that really just needed a second chance because they had been working hard. They did what they were supposed to do, and the banks changed the game on them, right? And so when we're talking about this whole space right here is filled by our friend in the penalty box, right? So it's really, really powerful to understand just how many people there are. So again, there was an example earlier. We had an acquisition, right? We acquired a property. It's $180,000 is what the note was for. Well, when you resell this thing, you're providing a service. You're not just selling the house, you're providing a service of financing, right? And you're actually going to do some other things we don't have time to talk about today, but you're serving this penalty box buyer. And for doing that service, those extra above and beyond services, you can charge a premium for this. And they'll happily pay it. You know why? Because no one else is really willing to work with them right now, right? And so they're willing to pay a premium price. And as Eddie said, they've got money. They'll put a down payment down. And so, hey, 10, 15, 20%, whatever it is, a lot of this is up to you and what you're trying to accomplish. And I'll explain that in a second, because once they put a down payment, they're still going to owe a note, right? They're going to owe a penalty box buyer owes you, the investor, a note, right? A mortgage payment. And then a payment is owed to wherever you're borrowing the money from. But the reason you would want to get a bigger down payment today is kind of multifaceted. Number one, what if you need to make money today? I run a business, Eddie. I've got overhead. I like to scale, and believe it or not, I've got a family and I've got kids, and my kids like to eat snacks, and snacks are expensive. So I need money today. It's not just about building wealth sometimes. But the other thing is this. When somebody comes to you and they says, I'm willing to put $45,000 of my hard-earned money into this asset, what they're telling you is I'm committed and I'm going to pay my mortgage every month. Because if they don't, that money, it's gone. So when Eddie says you're talking about a quality product, a quality borrower, like all these things, this is what makes this such a phenomenon in today's marketplace, is you can truly get someone fully committed, like $45,000 down in this example, and you're obviously able to make some spread in between to be able to make some money today. This is really kind of, I think, the best illustration of the money that can be made in today's marketplace. And the cool part is, yes, you have a little bit of a tax burden here, but it's better. I can tell you this from my own experience. It's better to pay a little bit more taxes and get a better borrower that say, well, no, I don't want to take any money down. You don't want to do that, right? As Eddie said, if your marketing says, no seller financing, no bank needed, bad credit, okay, who are you attracting? You're attracting people who aren't going to pay the mortgage. And that's the complete opposite direction we want to go. There's a really great way to do this. And if you'll do it the right way, if you'll learn how to do this, man, you can really thrive in today's marketplace. And that's obviously what NoteSchool teaches. And so let's kind of come back to our illustration. There was a seller, they sold the property, right, to the investor. The investor now is going to resell this thing to a new buyer. We call our penalty box buyer, and they are now going to be the owner, but they owe money on a note, right, a mortgage note. But who do they owe it to? Well, they're going to owe it to the real estate investor. And every single month, the house continues to remain as the collateral. So if everybody got hit by a bus, that house can be sold and pay off what's owed to everybody, right? But from a payment standpoint, and this is in simplicity, but here's what you got to understand. There's a big payment from your buyer to the investor, which is great. And then there's a smaller payment that you owe, obviously, to the seller, and you get to keep what's in between, right? This is how cash flow is created. You get to keep everything except for what your obligation is. And so when we look at this, you've got an acquisition on the left, right? And what's really cool, and I just wish we had time to talk about it, but on the acquisition side, I told you can get terms that a bank's not getting you. And you might be thinking, I could get 3% now. Well, today you can, right? When you're talking to the seller, you can get terms that a bank wouldn't. And so we'll call it 2%, right? Well, that's going to give you a little bit of lower payment on a 30-year amortization. Well, you've resold this thing. You sold it at a premium payment with a premium down payment, and you've generated your own note at a higher interest rate, which created a higher monthly payment on a 30-year amortization. You got to understand the rates for a qualified mortgage borrower. Sure, I've heard 2.85, 3.25, whatever it is, and that's awesome. But what about the rates for the non-qualified mortgage borrower? Because I just told you there's millions of them out there. Well, in today's marketplace, it's between 6 and 10%. It's what it is, right? And before you think this is going to be a problem for a penalty box buyer, it's not, because that $1,200, if you add taxes and insurance to it, guess what? That's going to be pretty similar to what they're paying rent right now. So it's not a burden on them to go out and think, well, it's 7%, I'm out of here. It's just not how it works. And so now you're getting to create some serious cash flow that obviously helps you really, thrive, right? $535 a month, $6,500 a year. Really fantastic. So if you looked at this whole thing holistically, you're making $25,000 up front, you're making $6,500 a year. Then you're just going to continue to make that until this thing pays off, it refinances, or they sell it really over the next 30 years, because you wrote this thing for a 30-year amortization. And here's what's really cool about it, right? Maybe you're not excited about $535 a month, but if you can change your mindset to really start thinking about how this type of strategy can build your wealth, this one deal made you $217,000 over 30 years. And that's really powerful, because if you obviously go out and do 5 of these, do 10 of these, whatever your business model is, you can start to see how, hey, I was able to help these sellers from a tax burden standpoint, or help myself get rid of these properties, right? And I've also continued to generate income over the next 10, 20, 30 years. It's just a fantastic strategy. And so the key here is, once you've created your own note, you're in the note business. And hey, when you're talking about creating your own note, you are the bank. That's the point of this whole thing, right? You've created your own notes, your notes sit in your bank. And again, kind of like I said at the beginning, because I'll kind of sum this up, is that NoteSchool is really trying to identify the voids, right? Whether it's trying to find ways to acquire more deals, which right now creative financing and buying on terms is, I don't know why you would chase another strategy, because landlords are hurting so bad. This is a great strategy. The tax burden just adds more pain. Or you've got a bunch of rental properties right now and you're like, I wish I could sell, but I'm not going to give the government that much money. Okay, well, entertain this idea. This can really help solve your tax burden, really continue to build your wealth. NoteSchool, like we said before, it continues to just find the voids or the crease in the market, right? Like Eddie says, to help give you that edge, not just to compete, but to keep your money. It's not about what you make, it's about what you keep, right? And NoteSchool teaches you how to do all this and stuff. And so what I want to do is in the last minute or so, I'll tell you, if this is something for you, if you're trying to figure out, hey, I think this is something I need to dig into more, what's my next step? I want to invite you. We've got a one-day class coming up. NoteSchool teaches a full-day class that allows me time to take this content and stretch it out and get more into detail over a full day, so that we can talk about your questions, your business problems, and stuff like that. Eddie actually just wrote this book called Moneyball 2. Now, this is really cool. We're giving this away to everyone who registers for this class just by showing up. This is what it looks like to do creative financing during and after a pandemic. Because it's a one-day class, I'll obviously have some time to kind of tie in these other niches and really go into a little bit more strategies, especially the non-performing side, because that's a monster conversation right now as well. But if this is for you, I'd really encourage you to sign up. We call the class Golden Notes. Here's the cool part. The class is only $29 for the whole day class. So you can go to that link right there, noteschool.com/national REIA. It'll show you the dates. If you are somehow watching this on a replay or something, again, we're going to update this link consistently so that you've got an opportunity to go to a class in the next 30 days. And we'll keep teaching the classes so that you're getting the information in a timely manner. Eddie, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for kind of sharing your vision and really kind of opening some people's eyes, just like you did for me, right? And kind of giving us a chance to participate in this marketplace. I'm going to stick around and do some Q&A. But for now, just thanks to Eddie and thanks to everybody for kind of checking this out. Let's kind of turn it back over and answer some questions.
Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate that. We have any questions on the queue, Rebecca?
We do, just one. Brian, kind of addressing, people were very concerned when Dodd-Frank came around years ago and you had the exemptions for, I think it was 1 to 3. Charles will have to correct me on that. First of all, is that correct? Is it still, I can do 3 in my own name in that year? And if they have more than that, are you going to be able to help them understand how to do more than that and stay within the limits of the law?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is one of these things that a little education goes a long way. You know, when I got introduced to Eddie, this is one of the first questions that I had, because again, I wanted to do more than the 3 or the 4 or the 5 deals, right? So I'm not an attorney, so what I'm about to say is not going to be considered legal advice. It's been a while since I had this question, but I will tell you this, we're going to cover it a little bit more in detail at this one-day class, but let me go and tell you this, that there's a couple of stipulations that make all that go away. The 2 biggest ones are use an RMLO to do your underwriting. So when you're picking out a buyer, make sure you're having somebody else collect the documents, somebody else verify the income, that kind of stuff. This is, you know, kind of what creates that arm's length kind of distance to protect you. The second thing is use a note servicer, especially when you're creating your own note. At least in my experience, I'm not going to say it's everyone's experience because I don't know the price band of assets you're dealing with, but I've always had the buyer pay for that $20 to $30 a month note servicer. They're the one that benefit the most. It protects everybody. It protects me. It goes and protects my seller as well. And so those 2 variables alone are really what allow you to get around a lot of the headache that comes with, well, can I only do 3? Can I only do 4? And so make sure you're getting the right advice. But if you're using an RMLO, if you're using a note servicer, you'll be able to scale from there.
And by the way, we use a note servicer and it is beautiful. First of all, they create all the tax documents for you. It's just like paying for the buyer. It's just like paying a regular mortgage. You can include your taxes in there. So they're if it makes you feel better to do that and you feel more prepared to do that, they can collect all those and pay those for you. It is a beautiful, beautiful service if you can find the right relationship to work with. It's so hassle free.
And I will say this too, that if you're somebody who's like, oh, I really don't want that $30 going out of my pocket or my buyer's pocket, just manage your own note for 1 month. You're obligated to produce a statement each month. It will very quickly show you how $30 is the cheapest employee you can possibly get in a month. So that's really what it's about with the note servicer. Most importantly, you know, everyone starts small, right? Everyone starts with 1 deal at a time. But if you'll just learn to do it right from the beginning, if you have an opportunity and deals come your way and now you want to scale, you don't have to go revamp your entire business model. You just move forward. So it's a simple thing. It protects you. It makes your life way easier. So go find somebody. If you're struggling to find a note servicer, reach out to your local REIA. Obviously, you can always contact National REIA and they can point you in the direction of some places as well. We'll make sure you get what you need.
Brian, I got one other question on, will you be touching on a little bit about being able to buy and sell notes in your IRA that's become such a popular strategy. We have partners. I know you also have some great partners as well in that space, but Equity tells us that one of the most popular things that they're seeing is private lending and note buying in those IRAs, and it seems to be a very good opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. On Saturday, I'm actually we were adding in some slides here to kind of show what we call the $100 model, about basically how to take $100, turn it to $100,000 tax-free in an IRA, self-directed IRA, using one note deal. And so this is going to be an important kind of concept and strategy for somebody who, if you're active income today, I need that money. It provides for my business and my family. I understand what it's like to be so focused on that you literally let your future on the back burner. We'll get to it later. If you'll just learn this, you can at least get one deal done, turn $100 into $100,000. Again, using a tax-free instrument like a self-directed retirement account. And we will talk about that for sure on Saturday.
Awesome. Those were the only two questions that there have been a couple, but you were covering them as you went. So there wasn't a need to kind of go back to those. If anybody else, we've got literally about 3 minutes. So if anybody else has some other questions, we can cover those before we leave.
I will say that while we're waiting on those questions, I just got a message from someone in the marketing department. So this class is traditionally $97. It's $29. It should be $29 when you go to the site because of the relationship with National REIA. If it says $97, just wait like 10, 15 minutes. I'm being told it was being fixed like in the last couple of minutes. So don't panic if you see 97. It's going to be $29. You might just have to wait an extra 10 minutes or so, but you can go to the link. And we're going to do this too, to where we're coming back in, like you said, October, right? And we're going to really focus more on this non-performing phenomenon that's happening with all these non-performing notes. There was 5.5 million non-performing notes before the pandemic. I think you can use your imagination to figure out that with all these other people not paying, there's more than 5.5 million now. And so we'll dig more into that, but we'll cover that a little bit on Saturday as well. But yeah, we're just excited to kind of bring some content, and hopefully this is some solutions you feel like you can get plugged into your business. And if we can provide any value, feel free to reach out. I'll put my my email address in the chat as well, in case y'all need anything from me.
So Lori has the link over there to noteschool.com/National REIA. If you want to join Note School for their education session, Brian's got his contact there. And again, as he said, we're really excited about the October session. Didn't want to have them too close together, but with moratoriums beginning to be lifted from the foreclosures, and we've already got, when Brian and Eddie and my staff and I had a conversation preparing for this call about which topic were we going to lead with, and because of the eviction moratorium, this felt like more of a pressing need immediately. I know a lot of people are really suffering and trying to figure out what to do, but it's an opportunity for buyers. But on the flip side, that non-performing space, especially like we were just talking about in an IRA, could be incredible as those moratoriums are lifted off the foreclosures, and you can see what else happening there. You already had a ton that was not talked about at all in that space. There'll be a ton more. So we're excited about seeing you all back here in October for that session. We'll be sending out that information. So that's all that. I'm not seeing any additional questions. So you must have done a very, very thorough job, Brian. Woohoo.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, all.
We really appreciate it. I know Eddie had to scoot, but tell him we appreciate him as well. We'll see him in October, and everyone can reach out or visit with you through the Saturday session.
Sounds great.
So thanks, everyone. Have a really terrific weekend. I'm going to turn it back to Ryan to say goodbye.
Well, like Rebecca said, everybody have a great weekend. Be safe out there, and we'll see you guys next month.
Thanks so much.